Welcome to JCAL's Journeys. Discover the beating heart of Southeast Queens' vibrant creative community as the Jamaica Center for Arts and Learning proudly present this limited episode podcast series exploring art and culture in Queens. Hosted by civic engagement strategist and Queens girlie Tanisha Morrison, the series takes listeners on an enriching journey to uncover the stories, inspirations, and cultural influences that define some of Queens' most celebrated creatives. We are welcomed today by a literal jazz hero, artistic director, and so many more titles. Welcome, Rio Sakairi. Rio,
Hi.
welcome.
Thank you for
How
having
you
me.
doing? Of course,
Good. How are
of
you?
course. I'm good, thank you. All right, so we're just going to jump right in. You've played a significant role in shaping New York's modern jazz scene. How have you seen the jazz community evolve and adapt in the recent years?
When you say recent years, are you referring to COVID or just in general?
I'm thinking a little bit pre-COVID to now. There's been a merge, I would say, especially through COVID, and how it's changed a lot of our dynamics. So if we can go a little bit pre-COVID, COVID until now, that would be great.
Yeah. I think that one of the major things that I've noticed over the years is that jazz is being incorporated into a higher educational institution more and more, which it's on one hand, it's a good thing that more people are learning about jazz, but also it's sort of like it's hard to teach because to me, jazz is a Black folk music. It's it, it's a culture, and it's really hard to teach culture in the institutional setting without having a life experience behind it. So then, although like a lot of the young students are really versed in the language, like they know harmony, they know rhythm, they know structure, but then what makes it I mean, this is a question that I struggle all the time. What makes jazz jazz? And I feel like things have gotten a little bit I don't know, away from the roots, and things are a little bit little too nice, little too clean, I guess, for lack of a better word. But then there are a lot of young my being in New York City, part of the reason I just never considered moving out of the area is because there's just so much talent coming to the city from all over the world. And I think that all the young people are really eager to learn, eager to grow, and I just feel like jazz needs to, I don't know, I'm not, how do I explain this? It's becoming, it's changing in the way that it makes me feel like what I do is more important, in order to like, I don't want to say agenda for anybody, but I could sort of be a source of information. I could create a community where people can discuss these things, through actual discussion or just by presentation and having opportunity to perform and, for peer to see each other, and place where older generation and younger generation, can connect to each other. And I feel like, what I do at the Jazz Gallery and also JCAL, where, really bringing community, and the music and artists together, it's really important. And I didn't really answer your question, didn't I?
No, you did, but I think you also opened the door for, I think, an even more important question, because music is really in the eye of the beholder. So, how do you define jazz
Right.
and what you've seen jazz to be through your lens?
It's how do I define jazz? I mean, first of all, jazz is a Black American folk music, and it rooted in the experience. And when I say this, some people have this reaction like, oh, but anybody can play jazz. And what I'm saying is that yes, thing about jazz is it's generous and it has ability to take in other music, and it can grow and morph. But I think it's important that we acknowledge what it is, and then define your relationship to jazz from the knowing that it's a folk music.
If you're looking for an affordable, accessible way to grow as an artist, check out JCAL Arts classes. JCAL's cornerstone year-round programs offer high-quality visual and performing art classes and workshops for youth, adults, families, and seniors. Classes include piano, painting, cartooning, animation, fashion design, ceramics, acting, and much more. Learn more about our classes at jcal.org.
And I think, I'm from Japan. I've been here for a little over 30 years, but I come from a culture where everybody is same. So then there's a certain sort of shorthand or understanding that you don't really have to explain in order for people to like, oh yeah, it's a Japanese thing. And it's really hard for outsiders to like get in on that because this is something that you build over years of, growing up in certain culture. And, I think that but then, if somebody wants to learn about Japanese culture, or somebody wants to play Japanese traditional music, they're all welcome, but they have to have a certain respect to where things come from. And I think that, I feel like that's what it needs to, happen in jazz. And, until recently, I'm, slightly ashamed to admit that I didn't understand why people like Duke Ellington or Miles Davis or recently Nicholas Payton didn't like the word jazz, because when you call something, that is a black folk music, jazz, you take the power away from the, people who this music comes from. Like when you call it jazz, it make it sounds like it belongs to everybody, which it does, but then also it kind of, sever the connection to why it exists and how it came to be. And then, a lot of people will say, well, there's an improvisation in jazz, but there are a lot of other traditional music that has an improvisational aspect to it, like, Indian music, such, even classical music, in the time of back, they had a lot of improvisational element to it. And then, well, is this the harmony? But they, now that the harmony that I use in jazz and like modern classical music, it's a very close thing. And then, is it a rhythm? But then there's a lot of music that comes from African continent that has, or from Cuba, that has a lot of the musical, like the rhythmic component that not unlike, what we use in jazz. So then when you think about what makes jazz jazz, is that what binds all of that, the thing that, I guess it's intangible, but that's where the culture and sort of like the lineage comes from. And when I say this, also, I could be misunderstood for somebody being traditionalist, but I don't mean that. I just think that, to know what jazz is and then just understand your relationship to it and have a healthy respect, for what came before you. And then I think that once that's clear to you, and then it gives you more freedom to build upon it, if that makes any sense.
No, I think that was perfect. And I do hope our listeners really understood what you were saying, because some things I just took away. And I think this is for anyone's culture, is that you're absolutely right? Like these things are, these cultures are rooted within these even subcultures of people who have formed these things. When we think about blues, when we think about different types of music that were birthed out of situations for anyone, right? And anywhere, in any community, and how those things then are still a part of that community, but then transcend it because so many other cultures around the world and people around the world have understandability to it or relatability to it. And I recently also interviewed a few folks for the JCAL podcast where education came up a lot in making sure that our young people have access to these type of things, which sounds like a similar note here. Something else that was brought up was how jazz and blues and all of these other types, forms of genres of music are 100% a direct correlation to what we see happening in the world today, from hip hop on, to pop music. And I think you're absolutely right when you say that, there has been a little bit of a disconnect in people understanding even the difference between blues and jazz, but even more importantly, how pivotal it is to what we are knowing to be music today. That, like you said, improvisation, that harmony, that feeling, because that really is what jazz is. It's a feeling that an artist uses and puts through their instruments of use. So I think you answered it amazingly, and I just wanted to make sure I pulled from what I heard you saying, because those are just all really, really important moments and thoughts. And more importantly, the question still remains: how do we get young people to understand jazz now the way that generationally jazz has continued to transform over time? So that's a really good question. It's for everyone, but that's something that I think we all should know, that we want to make sure that we are continuing to lay the foundation for this type of music to exist, especially for the artists of the world who will be emerging and using these instruments, and I'm sure are pulling from the Duke Ellingtons. I'm sure that they're thinking about them, because the years changed, but a lot of the issues have not, and that is the reality. So the soul of jazz continues to live on through our times. So moving on, can you share your journey to becoming the artistic director at the Jazz Gallery and curator of the Jamaica Downtown Jazz Festival?
How much time do you have? No, I'm just kidding. But, so, I sometimes I get asked, how did you become artistic director? But it was not a position that I applied. I came to Jazz Gallery pretty much, right after it started doing stuff. And so the person who started the Jazz Gallery, his name was Dale Fitzgerald, and he was a business manager for late great trumpeter Roy Hargrove, and he had this idea that jazz is not just the music; jazz is a perspective. So he thought, he's an anthropologist by training, and he thought that jazz perspective exists in visual arts and literature and poetry, and he wanted to present jazz music as part of the perspective. So he opened the gallery in '95, and for about 5 years, he only had music when he has like visual exhibition that goes with the music, or with the poetry reading the music. He always presented jazz in that music in that context. But I got to the gallery around 2000. It's a bit of a long story, which you can read on my blog. But I come from musical background, and jazz was where my heart always been. So me and Dale had this relationship. He was old enough to be my father, but we hit it off. And I would say, hey, Dale, let's book this person, or let's book that person. And initially, we would discuss, what should happen. But then, like I said, he was a business manager for Roy Hargrove, which was, time and a half job. Roy, to deal with artists, it's a lot. So then eventually Dale trusted me enough to say, hey, you do, what you want. And that's how it started out. And that was 2000. And, even now our budget at the gallery is, pretty lean, and we run a pretty tight ship. But back then there was no budget to speak of. So then, my thought process was that how can I present good music without spending a lot of money? And I realized that New York City attracts a lot of young people who wants to make something of themselves, performing in the city. And I thought that if I hire young people who are more interested in opportunity rather than how much money they have in the pocket at the end of the night, maybe, what I need and what they need, there's a point that we can benefit each other. So I never really started out thinking that, I'm going to nurture next generation of young, musician. But because of the financial constraint, that gave me a direction of how, I was booking early on. And then that sort of became the identity of the Jazz Gallery after a while. So then, it also worked because financially we just couldn't afford artists that are, who are already established. So then, a lot of artists that you might know who are sort of mainstay of the scene right now, people like Jason Moran, Vijay Iyer, Lionel Lueke, Gretchen Pilato, Ben Williams, Robert Glasper, like you name it, they all sort of came through the Jazz Gallery, which eventually brought the Jazz Gallery and what I do a bit of notoriety. And that's when JCAL said, hey, would you like to curate our program? So, it's just sort of happened over the years. And yeah, that's how it started out.
That's really, really amazing. It sounds like when you are, working in your purpose and doing the work, this is how things pan out, right? When you're doing them for the love of what you do, they tend to blossom in those ways. So, congratulations.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And I mean, you just touched on this a little bit. You said that anybody who's anybody for real, has kind of come through this jazz gallery and had the opportunity to make it what we know it to be today. Are there any of your proudest moments or standout artists that you've supported over the years that you have a story for us?
It's a little bit of an embarrassment of riches. There's so many. I think the most recent artist that became a really huge star is Samara Joy. And I actually booked Samara at the Jamaica Jazz Festival. That was 5 years ago? And then, she was opening the festival because nobody knew who she was. And maybe there were, and it was also during COVID. And maybe there was, I don't know, 15 people listening to her. And then I turn around, and all of a sudden she's winning Grammy and she's filling the halls all over the world. And I know the JCAL would like to bring her back, but it has been very difficult schedule-wise because I think she's booked until the end of 24, into the early 25 at this point. But then also, what makes me really proud is that, individual artists aside, the Jazz Gallery really became this community where artists feel like it's their second home. And when I book the artist, I consider that our stage to be sort of it's like an incubator or lab of sorts. I like to consider it a safe place to fail so that they can, experiment things and they understand what works, what doesn't work, try out new things. Sometimes people ask me, so what's good that's coming out the Jazz Gallery? And this sounds really corny, but my answer is always everything. And even if something doesn't work out, there's always something that happens in the course of the evening that just, I don't know, puts a smile on my face. And I think, because I book these young artists thinking that they have something to say, they might have some room for growth, and it's a lot of possibilities, and it's every night it continues to be exciting.
I really love that. There's two things that came to mind when you were talking. First of all, a safe space to fail that needs to be a hashtag, and it should be a whole campaign around it, because not too many of us find ourselves with the opportunity to fail safely. And I think that JCAL and you, in all of the spaces that you take up, creating that space, I know for sure is the difference between someone following their wildest dreams and someone deciding that, it's not even safe to take the leap. So I just think that that is just amazing and an amazing feat. So just, again, thank you for all that you do and continue to do. And the second part was when I was listening to you talk that I know the Jazz Festival very well. And it's so funny that, I mean, you are single-handedly keeping jazz alive. Obviously there's more people around the world who are doing this work, and in Queens specifically doing this work. But when I think about it, without the spaces that you are helping create, who would know, who is giving young people the access to do that? A lot of the times, especially in the art world, things can tend to be gatekeepy, and things tend to be, cliquish, and, just it comes with entertainment in that industry. But to find places like JCAL and people like you who are willing to say, we all can eat and we all, have a space there, I just think is so deserving of an acknowledgement and celebratory. The Jamaica Downtown Jazz Festival, which, if our listeners doesn't know, celebrates the jazz heritage of Southeast Queens. What, in your eyes, is the significance for the community that it serves?
I think one of the reasons I love presenting concert in JCAL was because people actually people in the neighborhood come out to hear music, and there's always sort of a opportunity for discovery and excitement. And I find that audience at JCAL to be so open to things they don't know. Oftentimes in venues like in Manhattan, Brooklyn, people already know what they want to hear, and then they only come out to things that they want to hear. People are not so adventurous in general, but every time I have a chance to go see how things are panning out for the Thursday Night Jazz series, I see people of all ages, all color, people in the neighborhood that, type of audience that I would never see in Manhattan venues. And then they're all, they don't know what's going to happen because these artists are not familiar to them, but they're all open to discover and learn. And, I get the similar feedback from the artists. They would say, yeah, some people approach me after the set and they say, I didn't know what jazz was, but, if this is jazz, I like it. And, that really makes me really happy. And I think, jazz is a people music, and I feel like jazz community in general sometimes fail to portray that. Jazz put this wall, like, some I don't know, somebody used to say jazz, America's greatest art form. And my reaction to that was, yes, well, it's true. Are you saying that because you don't want people to come out to hear it? Do you know what I mean? People don't want us to be shoved down their throat. I think that we could be a little bit more creative in providing the opportunity to encounter something really good, but without the pretense of like, oh, this is a high art and this is great. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if you're familiar with this poet Sekou Sundiata. I don't know how to pronounce his last name properly, but so Sekou had one of the poems. He would say, this poem opens up as, I never went to hear John Coltrane because I thought I had to belong to something. And, that makes me sad. I want people to approach music like they approach food. You put it in your mouth, you like it, you don't like it. You don't have to know how it's made. You don't have to know the history. You just enjoy it. And I just want people to be more casual about it, And I see that in JCAL, and then that makes me really happy.
Yeah, same. And I do hope that we continue that work. Talk about some of the importance of artists challenging conventions and pushing the boundaries of their art.
I mean, if you don't do that, what's the point of art, right? And also, I think, when you say pushing convention and boundary, I don't know if we would be exactly answering your question, but with the recent event and what's happening in Middle East, and I see this trend with especially younger artists that they will immediately go to, oh, I'm going to write a music about this issue. I'm going to write a music about this problem. And I feel like that's a wrong approach as an artist. I think what artists need to challenge all of us is to find a way to find a common ground. Like what makes us all human, and just find a way to connect people that way. And I think when artists push the boundary or try to expand our perception and take us out of our everyday way of doing things, it's like shaking somebody, right? And then it's like, oh, wait, we may be different color, or we may, have a different ritual or whatnot, but we all love our children, or we all want to be loved, and we all feel insecure. All these things that we all feel that connect us all together. And I think artist's job is to somehow figure out the way for people to come to that place. I don't want art to be divisive. I don't want art to point out to the differences, because that's too easy one, and also it's not really serving any good purpose. And I think that's it's almost like doing things that seemingly ordinary and common sense is also really challenging. And how to make that um, stand out so that people will take notice. And I guess in order to achieve that goal, you have to keep pushing the edge. And I guess that's the way to. I mean, everything we do is for the self knowledge. That's like everything. And if we keep doing the same thing, we never get to know ourselves and us. And an artist supposed to be guinea pigs for the rest of us, so that we know how far we can go, what we are capable of. So yeah, I think for artists to, but then when you say push the boundary, I don't, just mean like stylistically either. It comes down to growing slightly larger than who you are, if that makes any sense. And then, that means different things with everybody.
100% definitely means different things to everybody. Are there any exciting projects or initiatives you'd like to highlight?
Well, I didn't do this intentionally, but for this season at JCAL, there are there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 really great pianists, the emerging in mid-career. And so I think today there's a piano player named Cameron Campbell. He's 22, 21. He's very young. He's a great piano player. And then later in the series, we have Sullivan Fortner, who's a veteran. He plays often with Cecile McLaurin-Savant. He's wonderful. And then we have Isaiah Thomas, who recently won the American Pianist Association's competition. He's a sounds corny, but he's a dazzling pianist, and I think that everybody will enjoy that. And then I think I programmed Miki Yamanaka, who's from Japan, and she's, but it's fascinating to see the one instrument being approached in so many different ways. So I hope that people will make it to all of them, so they get to like hear, so many ways to approach the same thing.
I love that, Rio. Thank you so much for your time today. On behalf of JCAL and the Queens community, we thank you for believing in us and investing in us. And we're really, really excited for what's to come for all of the amazing young artisans that you touch. And we're looking forward to a very, very bright future with jazz with you in it.
Yes, me too. Thank you. Thanks for taking the time.
Of course. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Become an official JCAL member for just $100 a year for free creative workshops, seminars, and enrichment opportunities year-round. Members also get 20% discounted access to our full lineup of classes and workshops. Through key partnerships, JCAL is also able to offer members deeply discounted parking passes on Jamaica Avenue and Broadway tickets starting at just $20. What are you waiting for? Head to jcal.org and become a member today. Today, we are joined by no other than the Queens-based Uptown Funk sound and visionary Bartlett brothers, Charles and Carl. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
So, Charles, Carl, what brought you to Queens?
What brought us to Queens? Actually, mom and dad, when we were little fellas, we lived in Brooklyn, and mom and dad said it's time to move. And they said, let's move from Brooklyn to Queens. And at that time, my brother Charles just started high school, Wingate High School, and I was still in elementary school. But once we moved out here in 61, I started Andrew Jackson High School, and Charles was in his second year at Andrew Jackson. But I guess just looking for a better life for us with more opportunities, and just we had an apartment, but here my parents purchased a home in 1961. So they were just trying to just give us a different perspective.
And I might add that along with giving us a different perspective, starting at Andrew Jackson High School was really a game changer for us in terms of musical education, because at the time, I mean, music and art was always the school that a lot of people went to. Many students went to music and art high school if they wanted to pursue, their dreams in music. However, we found a plethora of courses at Andrew Jackson High School. I mean, at Andrew Jackson High School, we had beginner band, beginner orchestra, junior orchestra, senior band, senior orchestra,
jazz band,
jazz combo. We even had a madrigal society, which these young folks sang. I didn't sing, but they sang Baroque music. Johann Sebastian Bach. That's what was happening at Andrew Jackson High School. And I might add that I was able to take music theory for 2 years, starting out as a junior in Andrew Jackson High School. So when I graduated from high school and went to NYU, I didn't have to go into my first year of theory in college. I went immediately into the second year. So Andrew Jackson provided a really fertile environment for us to get our musical chops together and start the Bartlett Contemporaries.
And everyone that may be listening may not be familiar with Andrew Jackson High School, or the Magnet School as it's called. And so I just mentioned that right here in Cambridge Heights. But when you pull back for a moment and just think about it, and this is sort of getting ahead of ourselves, but in terms of our initiatives, but music has been taken out of the New York City public schools for over 20 years. And when you just think about it, here we go to a public school right in Cambridge Heights, and we have a beginner's band, a regular band, a dance band, a jazz band, a classical band, an orchestra, which means an orchestra, difference between a band is strings, okay, with an orchestra. And not to mention a choral group. I mean, it was just unheard of, but this is what was offered then. And the powers that be, over the years, they decided, well, music wasn't important. But we're really getting ahead of the story. So I'm going to let you go back to doing what you do. But we just got so much out of Andrew Jackson High School at that time. And it's just a shame that so many of our kids don't have the same opportunity today.
That's where the Bartlett Contemporaries were born, at Andrew Jackson High School.
Right there.
I'm happy that both of you brought it up, because it was going to be a segue into, what you both were talking about. You hit the nail on the head. Andrew Jackson High School is now what we know to be Campus Magnet High School, that is comprised of 4 different schools that are all STEM related. But just hearing you both speak about your time in the school system, where art was just so prevalent to you, makes us wonder if, these schools in our current school system should be looking at a STEAM system, where that A could be changed out from athletics to aviation to the arts, and ensuring that young people in Southeast Queens continue to have outside of community centers and amazing spaces like JCAL, the opportunity to go to school and learn, day to day, what made and helped birth you amazing too. So thank you for that. And I just wanted to make sure that we honor that point.
I just want to say one thing, because you touched upon it when I heard you. I think you said athletics or sports or something. You might have said that. But anyhow, as part of Bartlett Contemporaries, we found that most of our musicians in Bartlett, we all found each other on the track team. I was on the track team, my brother was on the team, and a lot of these guys that were on the track team, I don't know what the correlation is between music and like athleticism, but a lot of guys that were on the track team played instruments, and that was how we said, oh, we got in the band and found out so and so that would run sprints or runs 100-yard dash, plays clarinet or whatever. And that's how we became friends in band and through the track team. And those two entities, sports and music, really commingled. And I might also add that the population at Andrew Jackson was half black and half white. And guess what? We got along. We got along. Been on a track team together. We played in band together. We went to parties together, in basement parties, where the coach would have to come to the parties if we had a meet to make sure we want.
Now listen guys, hold up a second, because y'all tell us some secrets. I know there's some parents out there who might not even know about these basement parties that are still going on in Southeast Queens. No, but that was amazing, and I think it's just an amazing story to tell. It lends into one of my second questions for you guys, which was what inspired you guys to create this unique blend of music. And I mean, from what I'm hearing from you, just from your primitive years, it was all of these different avenues, right? All of these different extracurricular activities you had, all of these things that you were exposed to that aided in building that. Well, on behalf of JCAL, on behalf of Queens, the Bartlett brothers, I just want you all to know that you are loved, you are respected, you are honored, and we thank you for continuing to choose Queens as your home, but more importantly, continuing to make sure that music is on everyone's hearts and minds. Talk to you later. Get into the arts at Jamaica Center for Arts and Learning. Our mission is devoted to offering quality visual, performing, and literary arts and to providing accessible education programs to encourage participation in the arts. We present free events and festivals ranging from film to dance, theater, music, and more. On the visual artist side, we mount exhibitions, artist talks, and initiatives in our 2 galleries. Whether you are into classes, workshops, exhibitions, or events, there is something for you at JCAL. Learn more at jcal.org.